Okay, so welcome everyone to the, first of all, the VIA Festival, Women in Architecture 25, and within this larger frame, the symposium that's called Feminist ÉLAN, Designing Landscapes in the Anthropocene. So we are proposing this symposium as part of the Technical University of Berlin, and in particular the chair that's called the same name as the title, ÉLAN, Designing Landscapes in the Anthropocene. So this is the third session of a series of 4. I need to click this further. So we've already had in the past days a literature salon with Svavariesto. Michael Schalk couldn't be here, but guests from Copenhagen and the Scandinavian countries to talk about collaborative and transnational feminist histories. All of this, of course, part of this overarching team, Women in Architecture. We then had on the following day a panel discussion with some statements by guests from various backgrounds and also countries under the topic of the entanglement of research and practice as a feminist approach, transdisciplinary. Andrea Kahn, I think, is still with us here from New York, design content, and I don't think the others are here today. They were rushing, so this is a whole, almost a, we tend to say mafia in our realm, right, Flavio? There's people around these different countries and also disciplines who know each other and who stick together, and it's a funny name to say we are all more or less one family. And then today we are heading towards what we called a round table under the label of international, because that's also where we are, what we are. And I think in this session we are particularly glad or happy to welcome guests from Latin America, but not only, because all of those are also straddlers across Europe and Latin America. And those ones will animate the session today. And as you also know, it's not only this session here in the room, but if weather allows, we also will go out, because the whole symposium is also part of a master studio, of regular courses and teaching at the chair. So we have with us all the students of the master studio Designing for Democracy. So they're all here in the room, and they will take us out later on an urban walk with the so-called Ducto Urbano, which you can see on the photo of the respective poster. And maybe I also have a photo here, which is a transformer, I tend to call it, because when it goes somewhere in public space, then it also changes something. And that was also part of the studio task in this master course. So today, my name, as I always forget to say, is Lisa Diedrich. I'm the director of this chair. I'm very new at TU Berlin. Just started in April, and using this symposium more or less also to give a little bit of an overview what themes we want to display at the chair, what themes and also with whom we want to work over the years to come. So everything you see in this list, collective, transdisciplinary, international, and promising, is also mottos or labels, you can say, for what we intend to do here. The topic today is called Propelled by Women, Playscapes, Commons, and Planetary Health, followed by, as I said, the performance of the urban ducto. These topics, I think, are very much feeding into what our students are working with. That's why I welcome them warmly to listen and also take some lessons to potentially build into their design projects. And these topics are very dear to the people we have invited. And this is to start with Flavio Janches, who comes to us from Argentina, the University of Buenos Aires. Long colleague, I think we've been working together for, it feels like 50 years, but we are not so old. And he just comes from Delft in the Netherlands, where he's also been straddling a little bit across continents and cultures, academic cultures, professional cultures. And that's why we find this topic so interesting here, not only because it's about play, but also the playfulness of this straddling of continents. you will tell us more. Then we have with us Paola Alfaro d'Alençon. She's also a dear colleague of mine. Also feels like we've been working 50 years together, but we're also not so old. And she has been researching across Latin America and Europe, but in particular Santiago de Chile and Berlin, under the topic of understanding what commons mean for the urban space, for urban development, sustainable development, and in particular also to create these constellations, let's say, of people that can move things together and in common, so to say. So we'll hear a bit more about this from you. Paola is a professor of international urbanism at the University of Applied Sciences in Frankfurt and also at the Universidad Católica de Santiago de Chile, straddling a lot. And finally, we have with us Laura Kemmer, a colleague I've been working with more closely in the past 2 years because she holds the chair, the Martius Chair at the University of Sao Paulo, and has before been at the Humboldt University in Berlin. And so the connection and that straddling in between worlds is also quite common to you. And I was the Walter Gropius Chair in Buenos Aires, so for a while, for 2 years, we were quite close, geographically close, and we also understood we are quite disciplinarily close, having common topics in the realm of the urban and how to animate it, how to develop it. And Laura is not from our profession, but anthropologist, political scientist, but still another perspective on yet the same object of study, as they say in the academic realm. And that's where we meet and where we also are very interested to listen to your way of looking at things. And you have been working extensively on the topic of planetary health for the past years. What this means in particular for communities or neighborhoods is something you will be bringing closer to us today. Great, and then as all of these topics are not necessarily linked to women in architecture or some sort of feminist approach, but discussing with you, also discussing within our team, there were some elements that were strikingly interesting to us to maybe look to a little bit more in detail. And that's what we want to do with all of you here in the room. Figuring out what role would women play, is someone identifying as a woman, maybe having a particular approach to all of these topics and to urban issues. It's a broad topic, but we thought it would be worth discussing with you. That's why I'm so happy to have you here. And then finally, I'm introducing to you Alejandro Orduz, who's here with me from my chair. Inchi Zagirbas, who's also at the chair. Alejandro is an assistant professor, Inchi as a tutor, and we have Hannah Nold over there, who's also a tutor at the chair or student assistant, both having roles, and very happy to have you here. And then finally, to come to the last part with which we hopefully then close outside, I would like to introduce you those who are behind the Ducto Urbano, which is a collective called Ensayos Urbanos, which have have been created in Buenos Aires as a group of activists coming out of the architecture school, and then some nowadays are also somewhere else on this planet, and some happen to be here in Berlin. So we have with us today Victoria Cuadrado and Javier de Geralde. I'm not sure if they are somewhere over there, here. And they are seconded today by a professional performer, Carolina de Vega, also from Buenos Aires. So we have a whole straddling team from the place where the Ducto has been born. And some of you might know that we had another group coming over to Berlin last year in November to carry parts of the material of the Ducto. So we have it now here, and that's what we will animate later. It has the shape and the form as you see it in this picture. So I think I have introduced everyone, right? Good. Then, if you want to have a little bit more information about our statement, give us today. They are also displayed on the posters on the wall. So I leave it to you to say more about your topics, and I don't lose too much time in introducing more. Great, so I think this was to start with. And then I would like to invite Flavio, but I think for the beginning we have something you brought to us where we do not need your voice as of now. So I just ask Inchi to put up your first statement.
It's on. It's on. Yeah. Just testing in a second.
What's the English version?
It works every time before and not at that moment, right?
It's in English.
Oh wait, go ahead. It's because it's muted. Okay, it's muted. The computer's muted. Okay.
No, that's it.
Assume
That's on.
the visitor to Imagine a gaggle of 8-year-olds chasing each other on a playground they held beside themselves. Imagine an enthusiastic team of teenagers trying to kick a ball, just like their soccer star hero, Diego Armando Maradona. Imagine a colorful mural filled with flowers and angels. As you, the visitor to a Buenos Aires Villa de Emergencia, approach, you see this is no ordinary mural. The mural, between depictions of angels and flowers, displays publicly the names of those you who for all these years were only remembered in the grief of family intimacy. Families of the victims participated in bringing in their memories and stories. Today, the space is being transformed into a place for sports and leisure activities. However, the identification of the space as a public area that belongs to the community was defined before the first brick was laid. Discovering the slums of Buenos Aires, known by the poetic name of Villa de Emergencia, emergency dwellings, is to experience a space where the city constructs itself on a daily basis. Here, one is most likely to observe need and economic incapacity. Soon, however, the visitor finds another type of experience. Villa de Emergencia are places where generations of residents have consolidated a defined communitarian structure into daily life of the neighborhood. To capitalize on that already existing sense of community, we have been developing this capacity of gains in the niches where people for different types. Many different types of events are programmed to define where and how to construct this new network of activities. You participate in this decision making through their writing opinions, as well as through drawings and photographs. This process of early involvement is important because it attracted the attention of others who were directly or indirectly became part of the transformation. One of the first activities was painting in Europe in one of the most difficult neighborhoods. Both poverty and daily violence made the neighborhood particularly challenging, but the project managed to involve youth with records of violence. Muralists, led by artists and social workers, consolidated the working. The subject matter developed by them set out to show the violence of the neighborhood by honoring the memory of those who had lost their lives to violence. Many of these cultural happenings helped construct a space of daily coexistence, putting into place not only physical and social improvement of the urban area, but creating the integrative capacity of making the villas part of the city. It is precisely the Roman culture that identifies the as community, where the possibility exists of transforming these discriminatory processes. Many institutions are trying to consolidate spaces where residents can define their own identity. This ranges from various religious institutions to sport facilities where soccer provides a place to get together, as well as a symbol of progress. Soccer star Diego Armando Maradona is the most prominent symbol since he overcame his humble upbringing to achieve international recognition. Many soccer idols have been able to rescue relatives from poverty through their participation in the great national sport of soccer. Games of all sorts, that is, recreational activities, are spaces that permit integration according to their scale, spaces, and communities, because they propose different ways of reutilizing urban space in the context of tacit or predefined agreements of social coexistence. A good example of games and the involvement of youth led to the recuperation of social disarticulated urban space can be found in the project of Dutch architect Aldo Eyck, who designed 700 playgrounds in Amsterdam after World War II. Through these play spaces, he helped repair a morally and socially devastated city through its youngest citizens. The youth were the mother of the process of physical and social recuperation, returning to the city its status as a community. The aim of this urban design strategy is, through these play concepts, to improve the social physical integration and interaction in one of the slums of Buenos Aires city, Villa Tranquila. As sort of urban germ, the proposed network of public places will provoke the evolution of others' inner inertias that can reinforce and develop the existing social and symbolical structure of the slum. In this way, rather than establish a definite design, the project will generate a process of viable future evolution. The projects are distributed in the neighborhood according to their capacity to define or reinforce new or existing centralities and to organize and distribute the social networks. The programs and activities proposed related to this logic provoke in the non-designed places non-predictable transformation. The playground network is a flexible structure that can be adaptable for each specific need as a space and activities. The result is a modular system where each different element constituted an opportunity for social territorial recovery. The construction of these playground networks has been financially supported by the Dutch foundation PlaySpace. This experience shows us a possible path. Obviously, not the only one, but a way to a flexible system suitable for consolidation through games, through youth and youth activities. It is possible to find a model of urban integration in areas and societies that are struggling to be recognized as part of the city.
Thank you for having sent this movie or shared this movie with us, Flavio. May I invite you to step up and then you can comment a bit more on your research or also practice. There's some interference still? No? It's good? Can you try?
Hello? Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Lisa, again, to be here. Yeah, we were working for, we're still working, I hope, for almost 15 years. So we look young, but I don't know. And it's nice to be here again and to see friends that we were meeting, I don't know, a long time also in many places of the world. Well, what I show, it's a project that we did It's not a project, it's a process that we started many years ago. Yeah.
If you want to click forward.
Perfect. And yeah.
Oh, no, I think this way around.
Okay. Yeah. And the idea is now, because also we don't have too much time, but to show some, no, maybe this way.
On the right, no, turn around, and then the right slide.
Yeah. Now, some conclusions that also is coming from my work in PhD in the Netherlands, teaching in the US, teaching here, teaching in SLU, teaching in, I don't know, so many places, and always trying to see what kind of concept we can add to this project. And the idea, the framework of this idea is to try, this is a studio at the Berlage, this is try to frame all the of the project and everything that we're trying to do in this kind of context, focus on people, not focus on infrastructure, not focus in I don't know, urban design, public space, but trying to see how we can intervene in their daily life, trying to recognize the opportunity to increase and to improve the well-being structure in the neighborhood, but also in the surroundings. So this title, Whose City Is It? I think also it's a long time. It's a framework. It's a framework that explains how we're trying to understand working on cities. And if we can define that the people is organizing their life through these main components, environmental, economical, and social, and the way that all these elements could be integrated and has health, safety, housing, infrastructure, etc. We have one that is the one that I'm more interested in is the communitarian values, how people are creating the way of living in the city through the community. So they are not themselves just individuals, but they are part of the community, and that's the way that I think they are organizing the daily life and the way to create the family and the organization of their family. And this communitarian condition is organized in this neighborhood as a place where the people belongs to, where all this connection between the community and people is organizing through a prestige. So I'm from here, and this is how I can build my prestige, and it's the way how I can organize the way I can communicate with the other one. So I'm from this, well, I'm not so sure, but for Argentinians, you will know what this is. It's La Boca and these kind of things that is organized in the way to how I feel belongs to a place is, of course, the football and religion. It's the most way to recognize how I build my prestige and how I belong to this particular place. And from there, I can organize dialogues with different people. So from there, I'm able and I have the capacity to start to recognize in the other ones that are different from me, and I can let the other ones recognize me as the value that I have because I belong to this particular place. So the dialogues between other ones is the way how the city could be integrated, how it could be related, and I think it's the best way to organize the way to be in an urban context. But there are processes of stigmatization where these dialogues are completely cut it, and this is what I saw in informal settlements. It doesn't matter how much money you put, these dialogues never exist, so it doesn't matter if you're still building and putting money, because they are recognition as a marginal, segregated, and fragmented environment. So the idea is not to continue putting money and not trying to understand how we can improve the prestige and how we can make these people be integrated into the other ones. Doesn't matter, never is going to happen, and the place will be stigmatized and will marginalize a long time. So the idea of all these projects is how we can work from architecture and urban design, understanding this and trying to organize a kind of a method, a way from small intervention that we can try to implement possibilities where all these people could build their own prestige and give them the possibility to be included into the urban system. So that's why it's already explained, the mural, and how the people not just recognize and use the place, but also how they are involved in the process and they want to be better, so they want to show how this could be transformed. And I think I missed, no. And this we can define, or we can recognize the process, because the project is not, it's important for them, it's not a huge problem, but it's very interesting. But I like to recognize the process. So coming from here, we know that something is needed there, political, economical, social. So we're trying to make some kind of action through an urban architecture intervention. So we create this kind of event, we make the meetings, et cetera, and we can create the actions. And through the actions, we want to change how the people used to live this place, what they do over there, and how they do what they want to do there. So the transformation came from here, through here, and trying to implement the transformation into the people. But the people react, and this is one of the reactions. So they need trees, so they react. They're trying to improve what it was proposed. So what we found is that this reaction is not just something that is happening, but it could be also a very interesting tool to define how these places could be transformed, because we are giving them the possibility to react in order to improve the sense of belonging and the prestige that we are looking for. And all this transformation change, so the action is not anymore what we want to do, what we want to try to provoke is a kind of reaction, provoke the people, try to change, and from there the place is different, and the activities that they are doing also, they have another opportunity. And this one, for example, is one of the examples. There is a library that has been built after the playground was finished. So the library is another reaction that is coming from the action. So what is more important, for me more important is this than the playground itself. How the playground produce a reaction or promote or provoke a reaction where the people could react and make the place better. And now they have a name, they have a place that belongs to, and they have a way to communicate with others in order to recognize the values that they have because living in this place. And I think all this process, it happened because there's some concept that also I found it very interesting, is the unslamming. And the unslamming is the idea not to be a slum as soon as the slum starts to be. So the idea for them, or for the people who live in anywhere, is to improve their life. So it's not to be a slum. They want to be, we want to be better. We want to organize all this way. We want to have a very beautiful neighborhood, a very powerful community, and we want to be recognized as part of the city. So the unslamming is what we need to provoke in order to reorganize and to organize this reactional process to improve the place. And the slamming is coming from the capacity of the people to do this. And this is organizing not just the library and the slam, but I think it's interesting that it's a framework to work not just in informal settlement, but also in any other parts where probably the places are looking for ways to be improved. Okay. So what we saw there is that first the reaction. The other aspect that we found is very interesting is that we could repeat this in many places. So it's not just one slum, one playground. We can reproduce that in different parts of the slum. And then what we found is that we don't have this process just in the place that has been intervened, but in in-betweens and the ways that these elements are going to be interconnected. And the interconnection in the in-between spaces is part of the reactive process. It's not planned, it's not designed, but just to go there and coming from, it's a way to reconnect and also to improve how the people are moving around, how the people could create safe places, other activities and things that could happen connecting from where each one of the project has been organized. So the micropolis way of intervening in the place, that is making these little elements all around the place, it's also organizing the structure and the urban structure in a polycentrical, interstitial, and interdependent organization. So all this prestige also could be organized inside here, because the people who live near one spot and the other one start to organize a kind of internal and integrated dialogues between themselves that makes the slum much interesting and with more possibilities to be integrated in the rest of the city. So what we can do also, we see that in housing. I'm not going to, because we don't have time, so I didn't bring any project. But also what we found is that the small cell, the elements of a family, is a way to start to organize the process and trying to look for more actors that is happening in the connection and integration between people. So as soon as you start to look who could be integrated with the other one, could also give the opportunity to bring more activities, more actors, and more connection inside and outside the place. So, what are you? Yeah, shower. So. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm thinking about the 15 minutes also. So it's a kind of stress. I think I already used them. So this is the last one because I know the architects or future architects or people who are working in design, we used to work here, and I used to work here. No, designing, education, different activities here. And then the rest is happening here. So the project is each one of these elements that are surrounding the neighborhood. No? But I think what we need to think about, if we are trying to organize all this process and all this way of thinking the place and the possibilities for change, is to try to think in which way everything that we are going to do could be interlinked and could be connected in order to have opportunities for development and for improvements here. So it doesn't matter what's happening here. That could be a very interesting project. The final idea and the final goal is here. And this is what is happening with all these processes start to be moved. And I like very much this, because I did it, of course, but also because I think it's inclusive. So many different people could be included, people that we don't know, that they are still waiting for opportunities to be included, but also it's flexible. We didn't know about so many things that happened from the pandemic or from, I don't know, what could happen then. And this, it's a very open network and flexible, adaptable, and could grow, could be reduced, could be connected, could be something new that we didn't know. And it's a way also to give the city a more democratic way of organizing and way of understanding how it could be developed. I think this is the last one, yeah. And, well, thank you.
Thank you, Flavio. This also just to quickly give a hint that there's a book table here. This is one of your publications, Flavio, which we have here, also at the chair. Public space in the fragmented city. That's also, of course, the overarching realm where all this comes for us all here. Happy to have a look later on. And then I'm inviting the next speaker.
Yes, thank you very much.
We just line it up and then get into discussion together. So I think what we heard a little bit about the public sphere taps pretty much into a topic that you have been researching about,
exactly.
Paola.
So Flavio, thank you very much already for introducing the Latin American context, where you saw it's a lot about people doing a lot of things formally, informally together, and somehow without that much of insurance of what is coming out of that. And I think this is also the story that I would like to tell you from this research, which is for the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft. So this is how I started to do this research. And I combined Santiago de Chile with Berlin. I will tell you why later on. It has something to do with neoliberalism, and therefore it was very interesting to make this kind of choice to go for Berlin and Santiago de Chile. But when I started this research, before that, we were, as planner and architects, we were asked from UN Habitat to give some kind of comments and to work with them on the idea of the new urban agenda, which was promoted in 2016 in Quito. And therefore, there came this idea of this co-production. So everybody was talking about co-production, and we were all wondering about what does this really mean, because it's somehow a thing which, here you see it, we started to understand how they quote co-production in this kind of new urban agenda, and related also to the development to the sustainable development goals. And there was always this understanding that they foster partnerships across sectors and disciplines where traditionally hierarchical knowledge production is complemented by integrative and inclusive approaches. So this is what we heard so far about this idea of co-production, and it should be also innovative by leveraging creative solutions and technologies for sustainable outcomes with holistic planning approaches, emphasizing attention to local nuances such as actor constellations and power dynamics. Pretty cool. We thought like, wow, this is what we need, right? And it should also be context sensitive, adapting to the unique needs and dynamics of local urban areas. So it was a kind of a completely promising idea, this kind of idea of the co-production. And what I did was that I tried to understand how does it really looks like actually when we look into urban development, right? And here you see also I brought you the new Leipzig Charta, which is this framework which was mainstream to Germany, and where we also talk about co-production, we talk about commons, and we talk about production. So there's always this kind of idea that different sectors are working together. But as we understood, it was very important to understand, firstly, how does it look like and what kinds of results are really coming out of that. And this is what we tried to do in the research. And firstly, we started to do research to understand who really coined this idea of co-production. And then we came across on Elinor Ostrom. She defined this idea of the commons, and this was also very very enlightening for us to understand that she coined this idea in 1980s. It was let's say, the peak point of neoliberalism in the UK, where a lot of public sources and a lot of resources were somehow privatized by the states, and therefore a lot of people trying to understand how we can still be part of that, how we can secure this kind of sources, and what does it mean, how we can develop this so that we can keep them and we can reproduce them. And this is what Elinor Commons tried to define there. She said a common does only exist when a common resource is shared by a community. This was the first thing, so to understand that it should be a common resource, right? And as well as the process, so it is a process that obviously processes are not always the same. So this was also for us important to understand by which different actors secure and reproduce the resource. So this was this co-production that she claimed. So therefore we understood that what is important to understand is what kind of resources are we sharing, which kind of actors are there involved, and obviously there should be different actors, and the idea is to reproduce and to secure the resource. And this is in particular important when we are talking about the entire idea of sustainable urban development, because there we are facing pretty much the need of resource sharing, but also the idea of reproducing them for the next generation. So this was then the framework that we started to work on this research. And here you see our symposium, where there is also the booklet I saw, because Lisa and a lot of people here took part of this, where what we had found out, we shared this then with with different, let's say, experts, we called them, in Santiago de Chile, but also in Germany. And the first thing, what we had the need, firstly, was to understand, I mean, Elinor Ostrom, she is an economist, she's a sociologist, and we wanted to understand how does it look like in urban development with this kind of idea of a commons. And what we found out is so interesting as that commons has been always part of urban development. I mean, the resource water is the reason why we found cities, right? So we have also a lot of different resources actually, where we highly want to share them, and they are very contested, right? So this is what we found out, and therefore we were very, I would say, confident that that this idea of the commons is pretty much related with urban development. And we went then further, and we went to Chile, and Chile is, when we look into the different indicators, we understand that this is a completely neoliberal urban development, where a lot of the urban development is privatized. We have a very weak state, and we have a lot of processes which is driven by different actors in this understanding of ensuring resource. And one resource is obviously land, right? So the understand, and here you see, for example, so we went back on the historical traces of Chile. This is Operación Cita from the 1960s. In that time, also promoted by what is that? Popular, Unidad Popular, from Unidad Popular. Exactly. Yes, by this socialist party in that time with Salvador Allende. And what people usually did was, these were poor people, they acted together with different political actors, and they somehow squatted the land and stayed there. And this is why it calls Operación Cito, because they took the land like Gece Kondus, that you do also in Turkey, and then they they got the permission to stay there, because the state then negotiated with this owner of the land, and they started then to do projects. And usually these were small housing projects, which were furtherly then developed further as housing policies and big housing projects from the state. You see this here on the right side. One of this is Villa Frey, which was developed in that time. And what was for us so beautiful is that those traces of big plots built in this time, they have still a validity in terms of social spatial expression. On one hand, there are open spaces with a lot of public spaces that you can enter, because usually in Santiago de Chile a lot of things are fenced because they are private, and these are still areas where you can circulate along those neighborhoods. And those settlers here from 1960s, they got kids and they started a very strong community, and they are still fighting for those kinds of neighborhoods which they are now inhabiting, right? And there is a strong knowledge to understand that this is our space, and we have to claim for that, and we have to somehow take care that it will not be privatized. So this was for us very interesting to understand that there is a big heritage in this area. And this is also how, for example, Ucamau, that the group that we worked with, are also actually today claiming still space in Santiago de Chile. And what was on one hand for us so interesting is that this is still a very political action. And on the other hand, what was also very interesting to understand for us it is driven by women, right? Because a lot of women are raising their kids alone, in particular in the lower social context in Santiago de Chile, and they tried to develop decent and also secure neighborhoods, also by working then with different actors, with different architects together. And here you see, for example, I will also enter into dimension and to the spatial outline of this Ucamau project, which what they built. And when then we started to look back on this idea of co-production, we pretty much I think that we were assuming, we got there confirmed that it is obviously very much related with this movement from, let's say, a state which is taking care, it's an active actor in urban development, promoting, producing, maintaining, and ensuring housing areas, for example. And today it is only one stakeholder more in this entire urban development. This was the critique here, where you see public sector is becoming big society, right? So this was this understanding. And on the other hand, it is obviously very much also criticized to say, co-production is nice, but who is really ensuring what we are producing? Is it not something like that it becomes gentrified and in the next cycle it is then privatized when it is then sold out or overtook by private actors? So this was very interesting to understand. And on the other hand, it is also very much related here, Harvey. I don't want so much enter into details because we don't have that much time, but I thought it would be interesting to understand that it is also related with this idea of how, in particular, the local city-state is acting actually, that there is this claim to say we want to attract best investment, we have to ensure investment in our vicinities and in our let's say, in our areas of urban development, and therefore there is this critique that co-production sometimes can also mean that you are producing not for you or possibly for you now, but in the next time it will become something like a club that also Elinor Ostrom was talking about, that when this kind of resources are only driven by particular persons, by particular actors, then it is a club, like you use a golf club, right? You use the resource, the green area, and it is driven by money, and you ensure this, and not everybody has access on that. So the question is always, who has access to this? Was for us in the urban development something that we could add on into this definition of co-production and on the commons. And here for also a drawing here by Urban Catalyst, let's say, ideas that we have to take care of control, basically, when we really do this kind of urban developments, where we have a lot of those urban developments, actually, that they are all participative, they are all co-productive, and but on the way, there are only small moments where you can really access into that, and you have a particular role. So you're not co-producing, you are part on a design process where you have the possibility to enter in something. And this was for us very understanding that it should be something like cycles. There should be a possibility still to see what you are producing, to ensure that it is still yours in that term. So this was for us very interesting to understand. So this, I brought you a couple of books that might be interesting for you if you are interested to understand this idea of the commons, which is actually also, it became, when we started with the research, it was not that much, but actually it is a buzzword, right? So everybody's talking about commons, co-production, and but it is important to understand that there are some kind of limits, and not everything which is produced with a lot of actors, then it's a co-production or a commons by itself. And therefore what we started to understand was, on one hand, what kind of process structure are developed that we called urban governance, and then which different actors are involved in this that we called knowledge, because everybody's bringing a piece of knowledge into this development, hopefully, and ideally when we think back to the idea of Elinor Ostrom, and this, since we are architects and urbanists, we had pretty much the interest to see what is coming out of those projects, or not this project still going from one loop to the other and never ending, right? Which is also can be something which could be part of it. So this is what we did. And the first thing is, what I find interesting to bring is here, what kind of resources do we share actually? And what we found out here, this was the first case studies that we did, and we did a Delphi study, which is usually a study that you do when you want to have Meinungsbilder, so then I'm lost with English, Meinungsbilder, opinions, right? And we did this based in Berlin and in Santiago de Chile. We did this with a pool of 50 experts or 60 experts. We called experts people who are involved into urban development. This can be ideally in the idea of the comments of Elinor Ostrom. We asked the city, we asked citizens, we asked foundations, we asked also academics, and we asked mainly everybody that they would let us know what do they think, what comments are, what kind of processes and projects do they understand, and how are those ones developed. And what actually, then we started to do prototypes out of them, and we understood that what is very important is this idea of claiming the city. So the typical idea of right to the city was very much named by a lot of different and by a lot of experts, and then we pretty soon came back with this idea of housing developments, which are on one hand driven by the states, but on the other hand also somehow did by different groups. And the entire sustainability sector was also very much named in this projects or in this kind of samples that we got from the Delphi study. And something which we also find very interesting, this is, for example, the plan of Santiago de Chile. And for those ones who are not introduced into the city, the entire upper part here, the light one, is it's a completely segregated city, right, where the rich are living with the rich and the poor are living with the poor, and there is not that much of mixture in between. And we found out that the most named project were in the poor part of the city, and they were always related with the idea of the state helping to develop housing areas, or citizens trying to develop in small political groups that tried to develop housing areas. And this one, which was jumping out of this kind of typical framework, was a environment project, Mapocho Pedaleable, which should be a kind of urban river development driven by the state and by the city itself and by different districts, because you have a river there. But this is so far not developed, actually, but it was named as a very important project. When we look here to the sample of Berlin, we found out that there are a lot of socio-cultural spaces also related with the aspect of housing, but also driven once from the city and from different counties, but also from the citizens themselves. And here I wanted to show you this project more in detail. Ucamau, which what was very interesting is that usually they relied on the idea of basic funding for housing development in Chile, where each family obtain a small credit from the state to develop a housing or to buy a small house. 42 square meters for 4 persons is commonly what you get, but therefore this kind of urban developments are in the periphery, so it means for a lot of families, young families, that they have to abandon their usually cultural and family bounds, and they have to go to the periphery. And in those peripheries they have long distance ways than where they work, and this was something that a lot of Chileans are refusing actually to do, but they don't have this kind of other possibility to do that because their other plots are private in the city themselves. So what those community here did is that they became also a political force. They started to work with a political party, and they started. First thing was to say we want to stay where we have been growing up, and this was in the center of the city. And they occupied the site. They started to make force, political activism, right? So they said, if you don't give us the site, we will not vote for you. If you don't give us the site, we will stay here and we will say that it's not working actually. So by the way, they could somehow make this kind of contestation on different levels so that they could then they could stay there, and they started to develop with this kind of money that each of those families got. They put this money together in a common budget, and then they started to build not only one single house, they built an entire housing district, which by the way, it's bigger than 42 square meters, it's 60 to 75, which was great. And on the other hand, this was cheaper and in the city itself. So if you see it neoliberal, you would say win-win, something like that. But what was beautiful is that the people somehow could do something different. And here you see typical things for co-production that we learned is that kind of completely dense actors constellation where you always come together with political forces, where you always try to understand how you can be part of urban development just going on. And the idea is always to think, how do I get the money to develop those projects? And this is what basically here you see also, here they started with this political force, and Vecinos de Estación Central, which is this neighborhood that you also saw on the plan, and they started to associate themselves with different political forces, and then started to enter also as a foundation now into this kind of let's say public funds which were provided from the city for those development, but changed them completely to their needs and to their possibilities that they had. And here you see the development itself. As I mentioned to you, there are living a lot of women with their kids, and what was for them also very important was this understanding to be sure, to be ensured here in urban development. And this is why they selected this kind of very dense form and have in the middle and in this area courtyards where everybody can look, every family can look where the kids are, what they are doing there, and you can also share somehow caring of kids and of the grandma, and something like that would get lost because she's a little bit older already. And this was part, so it's a city in itself, right, which was developed there. And this was very interesting for us to understand. And what are the dynamics of co-production that we understood? And here we also quoted this understanding of co-production, and by the words that we got from our group that we asked, and they say briefly describe in your own words the meaning of the term urban co-production. I do not think it is a concept that is present here. We make projects that in the initial stage have an important dose of participation. So co-production is not so much in the understanding of a lot of people who are doing this, in particular in different parts, but there's this understanding that you are part of something and you belong to something. And it is a distribution of power and constant dialogue between at least three types of agents that are market, state, and civil society, which obviously was, I guess, some of the experts from the academia which were more introduced into this understanding. But it was interesting to see that it is always based as different actors, and it is a process. And here we understood also that other processes of co-production are going in the same manner. So this is Alejandro Aravena, La Quinta Monroy, which won the Pritzker Prize for this development, where the state provided also in Chile, in the north area, also a kind of a yard. They developed also a yard, which is something which can be more helpful if you raise up kids, was always that what we understood or what we got to know when we were talking with the people. And the families themselves have the possibility to extend their neighborhood and extend their houses on. Or on the other hand, what they do here in particular in this area is that they have their own small market and developed also small business, not related with where you live, not somewhere else. And this was something which was very interesting for us. And when we look more back to Latin American urban development and traces, then Lina Bombardi, she built, for example, for the city on a state program, which is also related with the idea of economical but social opportunity in one space. She built here La Fábrica de Pompeii, and where she was putting together artists place it, but also dentists you get there, or people who are enjoying the public space. And she was saying the most important thing is not to know how to build well, but understand how most of the people live. This was something that we also understood, that this is something which are in our traces in urban development. I mean, we can go back to what we also have talked here, Konrad Wachsmann, wachsende Häuser, etc. It's always a thing where it is somehow in our DNA of urban development. It is somehow based, and this was for us very interesting to understand. And here you see the co-production type that I also leave you only to see that here this house in itself is also one co-production type, where we tried to understand something which is very particular for Germany in that case. And it is that this kind, and with the question here, what is the impact of co-production process in the local governance system? So what are those groups doing when they co-produce and they build a house, they build a development, what kind of traces you can find there? This was very interesting for us to understand. And here you see from the ex-Blum Großmarkt, from this area, you see the power balls, the governance structure that we found there. And for us it was very interesting that what was very interesting is that we see actors from different areas of the society which built this development, but they did a kind of a board where everybody was putting a different capacity, a different resource, also in terms of money, into this development, and therefore they could somehow, on a sharing model, like for example Ucamau also did, they could develop this then together and bring this into this development and adapt to their needs. So this was very interesting for us to understand that you detach from where you belong to and you build a board structure which can be driven by this community who decide to build this project or get this opportunity. And this was very interesting for us, that basically we called this a collaborative co-production where everybody can be part of this, and versus what we found in Latin America and in Santiago de Chile, which we called a contested co-production, where all those efforts that people are doing, they never enter into general and official frameworks. They do this, they contest, they squat the site, and if they if they are lucky, they can build. They can build better than the state is doing actually, but this is never going back to the state, and they don't have learning programs that we usually in Germany have, because we have a city and a state which is a little bit bigger. There are more people, which we are paying also by our by our money, and this is something which in Chile does not exist, and therefore all these efforts are somehow always based in this kind of groups, and I think that's somehow as it is. Therefore, informality is so interesting to understand this and these different possibilities that you have. And yes, so my learnings. If you take this co-production, often arise in a contested urban areas. I think that's very important. Without a need, no co-production. addressing governance gaps and promoting social inclusion, hopefully, if it works. Transformative potential is always a thing which is very much bounded with the idea of co-production, which can challenge existing power structures and can enable new forms of collective governance and projects. But, and this is, I think, the most important thing, you need access to those things. And you need access to the ground, you need to the land, you need access to the money, or you have to bring your money with you, and you have to ensure that those projects are not privatized. And you ideally, we have here diverse actors because everybody brings knowledge, but also are connected to other parts where they can somehow pool also other resources, which basically are money and permissions to develop those things. And it is also related with something which for us as urban planners might be important to understand. It is a process understanding, so that we understand that we have to bring a process forward, and then we can then see how we can arrange those kind of developments. And yeah, I leave you our last publication where we said something a little bit more bigger than I said now, and yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'll circulate also this book. I think Paola quoted from it, right? The Effective Planning. So just taking this around if you want to have a look. And I invite Laura.
Thank you, Lisa.
To continue, it's a totally different topic, one thing, planetary health, but I think it also relates to somehow what we have heard.
Yes, I made an effort to connect, and I'm happy that Paola already showed a picture from Sao Paulo, Lina Bobardi. So, as Lisa mentioned, I'm based in Sao Paulo, and as Lisa also mentioned, I speak to you as an anthropologist and also urban researcher, quite interdisciplinary, educated, and I will try to bring you this concept of planetary health and healing. So I will do this Brazilian style. I have some notes on my phone. So that's why I can't hold the, how do you call this in English, at the same time. Can you do it for me? Yeah, cool, Paola. Thank you. Thanks, Ichi. This is a feminist spirit, I would say. So, yeah, I thought, well, actually, I'm very sorry also for the design of this presentation, since I'm not a designer. But I thought also in the context of this festival and in the context of Lisa's beautiful chair name and concept, which I have been quite inspired by and which I find really, really interesting to follow in the next years. Very much looking forward to all the collaborations emerging also with Paola and Flavio and others in the room. I just wanted to also say, so I will talk about cases in Berlin and Sao Paulo today, and I will talk a lot about indigenous perspectives, black feminist perspectives, and as you can see, I identify as a white woman, so I just wanted to also bring this positionality in this context of the event. But yeah, thank you, Lisa, for the invitation. So as I already mentioned, it's two concepts I want to bring you. The first is planetary health or healing. I will talk a little bit about this, planetary healing, as a feminist and transformative practice in designing landscapes in the Anthropocene, so the proposition of the chair. And by this I will put somehow center stage what has appeared in your presentation. Flavio, if you, I don't know, I mean, I'm biased, of course, because I look at these buzzwords. I saw health in your diagram and I saw well-being in the overall frame of the presentation. So let's try to put this now center stage. And secondly, I will bring examples from a collaborative design project. So me as an anthropologist, I have encountered design since 2 or 3 years as something which is quite interesting for me, together with my colleague Jamie Baxter at Urban Design at Technical University Berlin as well. We have been coordinating a project called Riparian Struggles. So it's struggles for rivers, riparian could also sound like repair, but it's connected to rivers. And this is a project that has unfolded with partners. It's a collaborative project between Jakarta, Berlin, and Sao Paulo. And I would just talk about Berlin and Sao Paulo today, as I mentioned, because this is the places where I live in Berlin since 15 years. I live in Sao Paulo now since 2 or 3 years. I work in Brazil since 10 years, so this is more context I'm more familiar with. I love that Paola has already put the water issue as an issue that is both decisive for urbanization, even the place finding, but also as a commons, of course. So I think it connects also quite well to your presentation. So this is my proposition. So to switch maybe a little bit the theme of this conference, Women in Architecture, I will not necessarily speak about women, although I'm very interested in talking about this in the roundtable, but of a feminist perspective, which involves LGBTQ communities, and not necessarily about architecture, because this is really not a field I'm too familiar with, but I will try to show you this concept of designing with the planet that we have been developing together in this project. Okay. Next slide. I wanted to open because, I'm also new to all these debates of planetary design. So I would really also like to share my questions with you and think together. So what does it mean to design landscapes not for, but with planetary systems in crisis? And I think this echoes also the ELAN's ethos, so to say, the chair's ethos of understanding the Anthropocene not as an end, but as a call to action, rooted in feminist ethics of care, responsibility, and transformative actions. And what you can see on the picture is, many of you probably are familiar with the site. It's Floating University. It's not floating and it's not a university. Located in, quite in the heart of Berlin, no? An occupation of a polluted rainwater basin, occupied since 2018. And what I just wanted to share with you is, in this context of designing with the planet, is a conflict over habitability, which I find quite represented in this picture, which I took in 2021. So there is a constant push by local authorities for cleaning the site, no? And I think cleaning in the context of healing and health is also quite an interesting imaginary for urban context, no? The idea of purity and so on. So this is there's a constant cleaning of urban authorities who also own the site, to make this a functioning infrastructure for transporting polluted waters, rainwaters from the adjacent airport field and also from the streets around it to the canals, no? Because in Berlin we don't have a very elaborate filter system, so these go directly into our rivers. This is on the one hand, right? I would say this is really a designing for in this. If you want to simplify it or provoke it very much, but for these kind of systems in crisis, right? So pollution, toxication, and then the idea of, okay, we have to make this infrastructure, this rainwater retention basin function through cleaning it. And then we have floating practices, which involves a cohabitation with the polluted waters and soils on site. There's experimentations going on with remediating the contamination through planting, through filtering, through composting, to living with water scarcity and floods, right? So the site has constantly to be adapted also in its building to this situation. So this is what I want to share with you as an idea of a gesture of designing with planetary systems in crisis. Next, please. Just before I get more into the project, Riparian Struggles, this is already a picture from the project. I just wanted to contextualize a little bit also in this context of landscapes, which is also a new term for me, but we've been working with it a little bit in this project and also in other projects I'm doing. Similar to what you have seen on the picture before from Floating University, this project, which I will share with you, Designing with the Planet, Riparian Struggles, also departs from an idea of, let's say, a ruined planet, so that there is actually already, we live in a contaminated world, there's pollution, there's all kinds of forced displacements of humans and species, monoculture, extinction, land sealing, which we just see outside, and so on and so on. So in a way, urban landscapes are sites of environmental and historical violence. They archive these kinds of violence. But landscapes are not solely shaped by human intent, but also by more than human socialities, so humans with non-humans. And this is where environmental, economic, and historical forces intersect. And this, in a way, calls us to move away from an idea of a static or idealized notion of landscape. And we can ask how landscapes emerge through often unpredictable interactions between humans, non-humans, and also all kinds of toxic forces. So this is not my thought, but this is very much connected to what Anna Tsing, an anthropologist, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with, has been writing about, that we have to acknowledge actually this kind of precarity and vulnerability, which then also can afford unpredictable encounters, right? And this is a way of becoming contaminated, of changing, of transforming together in this kind of collaborative spirit, instead of designing for purity, for instance. So, this is actually why I chose also this photo in the background, because it shows the result of one of these spontaneous encounters, let's say, of collaboration. So through our project, Riparian Struggles, we could bring, and actually Lisa was there also during the time, and we did a little event also after this workshop. This workshop brought together 3 representatives of Floating University, 3 female representatives actually, who met with the Salve Saracura collective, which is a collective fighting for a local river, a sealed river, a covered over river, as 300 others in the city of Sao Paulo. What you can see in this picture is an act of reforestation. Reforesting the former riverbanks, from which the riverbanks of the Saracura River, which is the name of the collective as well, from which vegetation is regularly cut to make space for real estate speculation. So as a way of preparing the grounds, let's say, the vegetation which is still evidencing the existence of the sealed river is being cut regularly by the public authorities. So remember the picture from Floating. This is a similar story also of how both collectives have been encountering this kind of violent removal of plants, be it reeds at Floating, be it Tayoba plants and other species at the Saracura River. So in a way, recognizing the precarity, if we speak with Anna Tsing, of one another, the regular overflows of both bodies of water in Berlin and Sao Paulo, the contamination, the violence of land moved and sealed, and of riparian and river vegetation being removed. In this context, the 2 collectives from Berlin and from Sao Paulo came together and shared their tactics of fighting for the bodies of water that they align with. What the Floating University brought actually to Sao Paulo was this tactic of seeding, of throwing seed bombs, and of storytelling also with children. And this is something that in Sao Paulo also the collectives worked with. So they brought this together in a workshop with children. They did mask making. You can see a mask on the head of one of the children here. which transformed the children into the Saracura bird, because the river is also an indigenous, the Saracura is also a name for a bird in Tupi, in indigenous language. And then they started this, this throwing of seed bombs on the river banks of the Saracura River to regrow the riparian vegetation again. Okay, next slide, please. So, this is really then one term that we have been working with to acknowledge this kind of precarity, contamination, toxic landscapes as a condition for designing with rather than for planetary systems. This term is planetary health. And planetary health is a growing idea. It's Paola already presented the SDGs, the development goals. There's different, always, of course, in different political junctures, terms flowing around. Planetary health has emerged, I would say, has grown stronger in the post-pandemic context, which is no surprise, I would say, because it is basically the insight that human health is not independent of environmental health. Very simple, and I think many of us can relate to this in a way. Pandemics, zoonosis, extreme weathers affecting human and environmental health is the context from which this debate emerges in natural sciences and in medical sciences, public health, and so on. But what I find interesting is not, so it's really a shift in a way, because health is no longer the determinant of human health, but it's really about placing human and other species' health on equal footing in the constitution of urban landscapes. And this really shifts perspective also for other fields. So why I like this term personally is because I work with philosophers, I work a lot with Southern theory, and I follow a debate on planetary thinking since a few years. So I was really intrigued when I encountered planetary health, because I realized, wow, the planetary is present in both fields, and even in design, I would say. So it's really interesting as a term for me to do all these kind of interdisciplinary projects that I'm working with, and also transdisciplinary. So I don't work only with natural scientists, but also with activists and also with artists and so on and so forth. So it's really interesting to connect. And I would say, I mean, one of the thinkers I like to work with a lot is Achille Mbembe, which is also is a Cameroonian philosopher, but also very prominent in Brazil. So this is why I like also that he has been very much received in this context. For Mbembe, planetary thinking really means acknowledging the multiplicity and vitality of planetary worlds, including humans, plants, rocks, rivers, soils, and spirits. And their endless transformations. So I think it's also very interesting in a transformative perspective. How I would bring these two then together, planetary thinking and planetary health, to make it even more complex, is through this idea of planetary healing. Why? Because it's processual, as Paola already said. I like this idea of the processual in healing, which is not about assuming the duality of health versus disease, what we had in the beginning, purity versus contamination or whatever, but it's really about acknowledging the transformative force of what healing is. And second, I like it a lot because it comes actually not only from academic histories or genealogies, but it comes really from a mix of feminist intellectual work, intersectional work as well. A lot of black and indigenous scholars are involved in this, coining this term of healing, and it comes very much from the ground, from the movements, particularly in South America, I would say, or also, no, in the global South, let's say like this, because I will cite two scholars now. Next. This is the summary of planetary health and planetary thinking. And then we have my idea of healing, as against this purity or dualism of health and disease, but as a transformative and political practice, I would say. And then we have 2 quotes. We can already go to the next as well. Thank you. So the first one is Jessica Hernandez. She has been writing, I have the bibliography also in the end, so you can take a picture, whatever, or I can share the presentation as well if you like. So Jessica Hernandez has this, I would say, critical point, which is actually about understanding that healing is also not this idea of returning, of restoring a kind of pre-colonial state, right? It's more about revitalizing the relationships between humans and the environment. So healing really in this idea of overcoming this duality of nature, culture, human nature, whatever you want it. And this is also in Vandana Shiva, an Indian intellectual and feminist, who actually, this is not in this quote, but I listened to a video interview with her where she really etymologically retraces in English the term health to whole. So she also works with this idea of making whole again, but not in this idea of really fixing and, you know, like repairing in this idea of we can fully return either to whatever pristine nature or this kind of what has been before, which is also a construct, but to really think of this. And I like this quote also in the context of this event, where she says that actually the crisis of health and ecology suggests that the assumption of man's ability to totally engineer the world, including seeds and women's bodies, is in question. Nature is not the essentialized passive construct that patriarchy assumes it to be. But ecology forces us to understand and to sense connections and relationships. So these are 2 powerful quotes I find in this context of healing, and not necessarily planetary healing, but as I try to explain to you, this is how I try to bring it together. Now we'll go back to designing with the planet. So next slide, please. So how do we translate this idea of planetary healing into design practice, or in this context of this project, very specific approach to design? And actually, if you want to understand better, because this was also my best source for understanding this idea of planetary design, and what our project also contributed to, which is a project, one of 6 actually, that have been ongoing in the past 2 or 3 years. I brought this interview with Kenny Coopers and Laura Kemmer, who have initiated the so-called South Designs Initiative, which Jamie and I applied for in a very precarious moment where we just needed money to continue our work, and we got this 2 years funding, and this is how we brought floating and our colleagues from Jakarta and Berlin and Sao Paulo together. So so how to translate healing, planetary healing into this design practice. So what I want to bring you now is an example from our project, Riparian Struggles, which departs exactly from this transition of designing, from designing for to designing with the planet. I think what is interesting about planetary design is like the idea of healing. It requires a cognition of and sensitivity to the radical interdependencies between human and non-human life in both close and also distant places. This idea of the planetary as well. And this is, for us, in this project, very much expressed in this battle cry, which is not just in this context, but also in many struggles around the world. Your struggle is my struggle, which has here been staged by Floating University, again at a festival we did last year on planetary confluences. And this idea of your struggle is my struggle really shapes our collaborative work. I would say that planetary design recognizes that shared planetary struggles are territorialized in local battlegrounds, whether subterranean, terrestrial, or floating. And And these struggles, no matter how seemingly spatial, temporal, or politically distant, require new coalitions locally and across the planet. So this is what we try to do in this project, to actually facilitate this kind of exchange and of solidarity and of building coalitions and new alliances. I think what is interesting is really this idea that also is expressed here by Arturo Escobar, who is also, I would say, one of the authors contributing a lot to the planetary thinking, but who has also been writing about design, as Achille Mbembe, who I mentioned before, also has. No? So for Escobar, design is the field where the possibility of transitions is actively imagined and enacted. So it's really about this idea of transformation transitions. And what we have been done in the project is we have been thinking about 3 strategies of planetary design, and this is really what I would like to share with you now in the last 2 to 3 minutes of my presentation. Yeah. Strategies for us, this is still very abstract, but I will give you then the tactics that have circulated within these strategies. But it's important for you just to understand the configuration of this. So corresponding has been one. We also called it multi-species correspondences, because we have been writing letters with bodies of water. Inche has been part of this, 2 bodies of waters, and so on. So for us, correspondence has really been a way of opening up new channels of communication between humans and non-humans, to be listened to and to be felt in this way, and in this way to become empowered through recognition and empathy, right? It's also in the term correspondence. But on the other hand, we also understand corresponding as a way of finding likeness in unlikely places in order to build solidarities while attending to the differences, right? So it's about this kind of exchange. Then evidencing is a term that is very dear to me, is about building arguments against pollution, against asphaltization, soil sealing, land speculation, to advocate in the name of those riparians, those fighting for rivers who have become hidden or silenced, and to unearth ecologies of resistance around water bodies towards a horizon of care, repair, and healing. And circulating is really about this idea of keeping to move, keep changing, right? What Paola has also been talking about, to be transformed, to transform, and to mix without reducing difference. So this is what we found. This is why our festival was called Planetary Confluences, and this is also what inspired us a lot in a Brazilian intellectual, Nego Bispo, who is a quilombola, so an inhabitant of a settlement by formerly enslaved and freed black people in Brazil. So Nego Bispo has this strong idea of mixing without reducing difference, right? For him, it's like 2 streams of water that when they confluence, they will mix, but they will still be one stream and another stream. So this has been guiding also our practice a lot. Okay, next slide. So as I said, Riparian Struggles is the result of a 2 years design project funded by the South Designs Initiative. It connects collectivities that fight for rivers in Jakarta, Sao Paulo, and Berlin by making what we call a so-called self-organized infrastructure for mutual learning and solidarity. So this project did not end. If you go to the website, riparianstruggles.org, or Lutas Ribeirinhas in Portuguese, we also have it. You will find few recipes and tactics being shared yet, because it's a very financially precarious project as well, and we are still working on it. But we aim at enhancing this platform also for teaching and learning collaborations internationally and everything related to water struggles. So it's really a very open platform. I just took a screenshot of the platform where you can see floating in Salvo Saracura, located Sao Paulo, Berlin. Jakarta is somewhere there. And some of the devices and objects and recipes, as we call them, that we have been exchanging as tactics to symbolize the tactics that we have shared. So as I mentioned, it's important for us always to say that this, when we present about this project, it's not my individual work, but it's really come out of this collaboration between LabTech Apung in Jakarta, South Saracura in Sao Paulo, and Floating in Berlin. And also the Planetary Tactics Lab of Jamie Baxter has been involved at TU, and also the so-called Atlas du Champ, the Ground Atlas, who is also a project by dear colleagues of ours, which we have met in Buenos Aires last year, a counter-mapping project. Just to give you a few examples, so mask making and seeding, I think I showed it to you in the beginning, no? On the picture with the two children doing the seeding actually. So this has been really a way for us to provoke a human change of perspective, to transform, for instance, into a water bird or into a plant or into an insect or other riparian species. We have done it also with other kinds of masks. But it's also a way, and this is how the recipe reads for this map, it's also a way of remaining unidentified when you do, so we also have been doing a lot of parading, like the ducto, our cloth of fabric was not red but blue, and it symbolized the river, of course. But during these parades, manifestations, what we did with the children also, we have been using the masks also as a way of remaining unidentifiable, also in the spirit of Edouard Glisson's idea of the right to opacity, which came from our collaborators in this project. Mapping and tracing. Sorry, I forgot. No, it's in the different order. Okay, mapping and tracing I will come to in the next slide. Planetary correspondences, you have been part of, right? Ichi, you have been one of the very active correspondents. We did this in a teaching context. So actually Jamie was teaching a studio on bodies of water in Berlin, and I was teaching a theory course on feminist theories of care, repair and healing, and then my students in Sao Paulo became sort of critical friends to the studio students of Jamie's, and brought them other perspectives, both from their empirical context, let's say, in South America, but also from the theories and concepts they have been working with. So we have exchanged physical letters and sent them between Sao Paulo and Berlin to put this idea of correspondence really in practice. Okay, so these are the examples of the tactics. If we go next, you can see some of the recipes, but because of time, I'm really not sure if I need to share this, to explain this much more. This is our way of translating, because we are working in a very, very heterogeneous setting, right? We work with residents, we work with artists, we work with activists, we work with academics. So our idea is that through these recipes we can protocol what we are doing in terms of tactics of fighting for the rivers, and we can share what we need in terms of ingredients, how we went step by step. This can be for a tactic of struggle, but as we do it recently, also a recipe for research design, right? So I think this is what I did in a recent course on toxic landscapes, actually. So I think it's a really productive way of translating our tactics or bringing them into a format. And then we have printed out these recipes, shared them, and so on, and circulate them. So it's not about reproducing them, of course, step by step, but of taking them. And they are also, if you go to the next one, Ichi, there is, I mean, people have also twisted them, right? So someone has printed it out. It's from the embroiderer in our neighborhood who was sharing her tactic of, I showed the algae before, no? Of embroidering as a collective healing practice as well, and which has actually inspired Ute from Floating University to bring an algae from the floating and to repair and heal it and document it actually by stitching it on to a cloth. So you can see how these recipes has also become transformed in many, many ways, but always documenting and sharing these tactics, which is the core of our project. Okay, so final slide. yeah, this is very playful as a way of ending, because I don't really have lessons for you or insights I could share in this context. I mean, I think what maybe healing as a design orientation or proposition could mean would really be to understand design not as problem solving, which I suppose is not new to you, but not as a fix really, because this is something that preoccupies me a lot when I work in planetary health or in reparation. So it's not about making amends, of making it good again, but it's really about accepting these ruptures. Yeah, so I think in this sense, it's really about thinking about designing landscapes in solidarity with damaged ecologies, with buried rivers, with displaced beings. This would be my ending, but also my opening, hopefully, for you to ask questions and to comment upon. Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you, Laura.
Just maybe to show, this is the website, and this one is the Ground Atlas website, which exists also partly in English, and where you can see the mapping constellation, so letters to the river that we have produced out of this collaboration, which you have also been part.
Thank you, Laura, so much. So all of this took us much longer, but it's always good because the weather also has changed in the meantime, and we just watched the forecast, and we thought we could, if we take a little longer here to discuss, then the Rhine will probably pass over, and then it is easier for us to go on the Ductor performance like half an hour later. And this is easy to observe. One further? One further? This one. Yeah, okay, thank you. So then I would like to invite the three of you to just take a seat in the front here. And maybe see if you need your little tables with you. Or maybe not, I don't know. I take this one. Yeah. I take my stuff away. It goes to the next one. And I'd then like to open the discussion, of course, to everyone who, first of all, wants to ask a question of understanding, because it was dense statements, and it was, of course, sometimes necessary to be able to get a question of clarification out to any of those. But while you are reflecting, I'd like to introduce a little bit the discussion between each other, and also to our topics, to also the topic that we have been putting up at the beginning. Of course, it's a Women in Architecture Festival. It is a round that I got together in the sense of understanding if there were some sort of connections in between what those organizers gave to us, but also what the chair is named about, designing for the Anthropocene, and what each of you have contributed in with respect to your individual concepts. The playscapes, the commons, the planetary health, and each of you have already developed on it. It's not only the playscapes, but it is also the unslumming and all those related interdependencies on action and reaction. It is the commoning, maybe also more than just commons. It is the meaning for it for urban development and for particular processes of governance or institutions of governance, or how we can influence and even use the idea of reproducing and sharing resources in order to better govern. And then not health as such, but probably healing as also something that rhymes much more with designing, I would say, as per your invitation at the end. And I think then we are pretty much back into what we are busy with, for example, in our studio here, that does not deal with Buenos Aires, Chile, or Santiago de Chile, or Sao Paulo, but here exactly out there in the southern Friedrichstadt. But as all of you, I think, have said, there is a way of sharing learnings across cultures, continents, and also disciplines. So what does it mean for here? And I hope there have been some ideas that could also inspire your work for the Southern Friedrichstadt, and that might also be part of the discussion here. So you're all warmly invited to participate in the discussion and maybe also to ask a question. So the floor is open if anyone wants to, but I also look at you, Alejandro, because we have prepared a little bit in order to play the icebreaker. I think it would be nice to first of all engage with you, and of course also you might have questions to each other. Anyone volunteering right now? Katrin.
Thank you very much for this great presentation. I'm very curious about. And I also work with such kind of topics, with commons and also in informal or settlements and self-organized occupations, and also with the concept of the Anthropocene. I have some questions, but I'm starting with one. So I'm very interested in your concept of planetary healing, and I'm wondering if there is any connection to the concept of care or caring, and also if there is a relationship between the planetary context and the local context. So there is also a kind of corresponding tactic between the scales.
Now we need it here, right? Okay. Who is the one? Yeah, then I'll take this again. Who is the one who wants to respond to Katrin?
I was just noting the question, but also thank you so much, because it's to the core of what is really. I'm very much in the process still of trying to understand what this concept can bring me or us in these projects. So I think your two questions are exactly what I'm struggling with as well. So the idea of what is the difference between healing or health and care? How does it relate? How does it differ? And so on. And also to repair and reparation, which is also always very close. And also your question about the scale. So maybe I can answer by saying why I think these are problems that are really worthwhile thinking with. I think for the question of scale, the interesting thing is that with the planetary there is a strong idea of overcoming the idea of the global, right? In Spivak or in other works on the planetary. So it's really this idea, it's not about globalization, but it's really about decentering the human also in this idea. So decentering human timescales, which would be the idea of thinking also how, for instance, a struggle for a river today in Sao Paulo is connected to the struggle of indigenous peoples or the Black movement history in Sao Paulo. Also, can also have a speculative gesture, which I find super interesting from the feminist perspective of also thinking about what this transforms or what's the transformative in this for the future. So, I mean, in our project, as I shared with you, we have been working with this idea of your struggle is my struggle, and of really thinking how from the very local, which is actually also, so the South Designs call has been all about the idea of the near South, as I would quote it. So it's not about geographically North and South, but it's really about also cases that you have shared about precarious conditions, ephemeralities, instabilities, violences, and so on, that can be found both in floating, but also in the heart of Sao Paulo or in Jakarta. So I think it has been our way of thinking across these scales of local and global, let's say, and also thinking beyond the human scale. For care, care and healing, so you asked about care and healing. I worked a lot with care. I worked with Elena, who is here also, in a project called Solidarities. It's something I wanted to share in the context of this event also, because we have been very intrigued by this. We've been working a lot with feminist literature, but also women, really, authors, and it's not a coincidence that, again, I bring you Vandana Shiva and Jessica Hernandez, so there's many really female voices in this field, both of care and now also of healing, which is a danger, I think, of essentializing it. I was when you presented Flavio, I find it so interesting because, of course, Maradona, no? I mean, in Brazil we would have Pelé, and this idea of the heroism, no? Of overcoming, of unslumming also through this kind of heroic gesture. I don't want to say that I know this is not what you're doing, but I just associated this, something that is always disturbing me a lot, this idea of the male heroic figure and then the female work of care and of healing. In Brazil, healers are often also female figures. I think there is really work to do to really differentiate and bring. I would rather than, because I don't like so much this idea of I have a new term and it's better than another one. So rather to really connect what is happening in debates about healing, which connects to also debates on care. To connect also to debates on repair and reparation, which is much more associated to male practice, for instance, in a very simplifying way. But I think it's worthwhile sometimes to simplify just to provoke these terms even more. So I think it's more about the genealogies and how some people who have been working on care, like Maria Puig de la Bella Casa, for instance, are now working on repair, for instance, right? So there is also these transitions which can be retraced. Yeah, but thank you for the question. It's really important.
I think there's, of course, also genealogies of concepts that are, we unpacked them here a little bit. They unfolded, and they even can be traced on the keywords of these posters. And they do have, their time when they appear. And then the question is, how do we link to, which was exactly your question. So it's an interesting, it's not that the one replaces the other, but maybe there are linkages, and also not necessarily those ideas of being, or the one replaces the other, or it is dualistic, but there's overlaps and manifold entanglements. And entanglement is probably also a term that we know it comes from a thinking that is much more, landscape, of course, oriented, because it's about relationships, rather than fixed concepts or so on.
And sometimes it's also very pragmatic. I mean, for you who are working in the field of landscape design and architecture, health is a word that we have in the post-pandemic work. We have to deal. I work on health simply because there has been fundings in this area, right? So this is how I came to it, actually, to make it really very simple. But then the interesting thing is, if you work on care, it brings you to other practices than if you work on healing, right? Healing is connected to health, if you want or not, and also to disease and to all these associations. So I think it's really it's worthwhile to really retrace these concepts. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your resonance. I think I want to open it also to the other projects we listen to, because I think they all disrupt the unilateral logic of knowledge produced in the north, right, being implemented in the south. And you ask also in different ways, what if southern, as northern actors, are not merely the recipient, but the producers of experimental ideas and values of play in Buenos Aires, informal settlements, and post-war Amsterdam, co-producing and commons in Santiago and Berlin, planetary healing and designing with more than human riparian struggles in Sao Paulo and Berlin. And all these projects of urban futures arising from transformation processes. And I was wondering, from the perspective of your work, how do cross-continental dialogues generate new imaginaries, methods, and practices of urban futuring just or right at the intersection of global north and south, like beyond this divide? In a sense, the term that Lisa is using in the studio, which are the edge effects of your project. right on this, right, understanding this edge more of a zone of dialogue. And what do you discover in the discursive, territorial, socio-ecological, more than human correspondence, and why not also tension of these discursive spaces while engaging with the different communities? So it's a pretty long question, but maybe, yeah.
Just take it. Well, I think it's a very valid question, because, I mean, usually when you start to do research for Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, it's pretty difficult to make this kind of comparison. Therefore, you need a strong argument to do that. And in my case, I think this idea to understand how commons or how co-production, which is completely related with neoliberalism or with neoliberal urban development works, was a very strong learning, I would say. And I mean, on one hand, I was astonished how regular or how, let's say, how equal neoliberalism is working in different parts of the world. I think that's very interesting, so that the market forces are always doing the same things. And but what I found interesting was this kind of ways to overcome this or to work with that. And I think, therefore, they're very different, right? Of course, they are different because, I mean, if you have here still a state in Latin America, you usually don't have a state which has this kind of capacity, resources to be as an actor. But we are losing this actually, right? And this is very, I mean, and it opens your eyes, and I think this was also the learning that we had during the symposium in Frankfurt, that we were astonished how much we have lost also here in Germany on this kind of possibilities to act. And I find this also very important to bring those worlds together beyond me, because I mean, I believe I'm working here and there and trying to get knowledge, but I think it's pretty much more interesting also to bring the actors to talk with each other, because there you learn a lot of things that you have not planned before, because everybody is taking a piece of knowledge. And I think therefore this idea of that we are coming from the global north and bringing to the global south something, then by this learning does not work. And it's obvious that it will not work, because the let's say the state and how we are acting here on a social, cultural, spatial area is completely different, and therefore we need to learn from each other. And in particular, when it comes to resources, which is climate, which we are all producing together. I mean, climate is not ending in Berlin. It's going to Brandenburg. What we do here, we know already that it has a big effect, in particular in the global south, because we have produced emissions 20 years ago, 30 years ago, which are now affecting our entire climate on a global scale, right? And those people still, they don't have that money that we have, and therefore then, as the third idea, we need to make these alliances in any case. Otherwise, a lot of these resources we cannot ensure or reproduce for the next generation, I would say. I think these are the basic learnings.
Very small, but I think what is interesting about global north, global south, I don't know, all the things I had experienced, I never worked. And what I found very interesting is to build these intermediate, it's in between spaces where everything could be shared. And everybody could find a way to be included. And from research we did together, it doesn't matter if you're coming from the north, coming from the south. We have different knowledge, different backgrounds, different ideas, possibilities, etc. But I think what is very interesting is to look for something new, and not somebody who is imposing something and the other have to act in that way. I think the best is, and I think from the design perspective, it's also the interesting thing is to build these in-between spaces, not just in terms of where it is, but also in terms that everybody could be included, and everybody has a voice where something could be done, and I think that a small change could be organized from there. If somebody wants to say this is going to be like this, it's going to be like that, I think this is not going to happen, or it's going to be something that is predefined and it's something designed like an architecture action or project in the city, but it's not public space. It's not something that is including differences, different people, different ideas and possibilities. So yeah, well, we work together, and we never thought that where the knowledge is coming from. The knowledge we build together in a kind of intermediate in between shared space where new things could happen and not trying to replicate things that are coming, I don't know from where. No? Yeah.
Anyone else of the students who want to ask a particular question because a concept would be very much feeding into their project?
Yeah, thank you very much. I was still thinking about the issue of getting access to spaces and about the privatization. So I was wondering what your experience were with working together with the government, and maybe also to you, Paola, if you could experience any differences in working here in Berlin and then also in Santiago.
I mean, honestly, the thing that I mean, it's clear that when you work in a city which is private, right, it means that it's pretty much more, the public space is not that much present that we have here in Berlin, right, where we have a lot of public space, and we also don't own all the land, and therefore we don't have that much fences, right? And this I found very interesting. But what I also found very interesting is that in these societies where everything is that private, this idea to own something is very important, because this idea of sharing is very unsure, right? And therefore you experience, for example, that when UCAMAO was starting to present its design to the vicinity, to its other colleagues, right, where they all had invested their money into this project, everybody was saying, but what do we own here? So, because for owning something, owning a house in Chile means also, because they will not get a pension, a decent one, right? I mean, maybe we also will not get this decent pension, but I'm talking about zero. I'm talking about possibly 70 euros what you get, yeah, right? So I think this is always very important to say numbers sometimes. And the people want to have a house because this is what they get, and this is what they say to you when I will die in my house. You know, this is where nobody will evict me there. This belongs to me, and I think this is very different. And there is this. You need a state of trust also, and there also of solidarity that those projects can be developed. And I think this is what we learned. This is why I found this so interesting when you were researching those projects here, this idea to make a board where everybody can control the other, or the process, how it's developing, and it's transparent. This is very important in those projects, and this is in particular also important for Chile. Did I answer your question? But for me, this was very astonishing, because it was not clear. You know, I thought that all the poor people also want to share, and it is obviously that they are afraid to share, because they are afraid to lose this very small piece. And I think this is also very helpful to understand that we need to somehow make this as a planner. This is our duty, right, to control those developments and to ensure those frameworks where we can really, on a decent way, share something together. And it's a challenge, I would say, also here.
So I think there's a lot of things to share.
Yeah.
But there's also, I quite like the idea of your struggle is my struggle. You know, the label which you brought up, because it's a little bit more, you know, it's kind of getting people invited to something that is not necessarily so beautiful like sharing. So it's not romanticizing the whole theme, but sharing something that we have to engage in common. So in this respect, it is maybe more down to earth, and still it's based on quite some literature, as you quoted some. So I think this is an interesting approach to also probably tapping, like for us as also claiming in this festival, we bring a piece of feminist élan, concluding that this is stepping into feminist sources, discourses, literature, authors, but not necessarily only to stick to the women. You know, this is almost more an opener to source concepts, tactics, and strategies also to collaborate across. And we had the topic of across pretty much since we have been working together, and across whatever you think, you know, continents or cultures or disciplines, of course, also. You know, as Laura is discovering landscapes and design, now we are discovering thunderstorm. It is, I would say, creating empathy, solidarity, and also we heard, you know, you said, Flavio, very much that it was about sharing a dialogue between differences, right? You know, the whole idea of action-reaction is enabling a new space or also time frames of dialoguing between the differences that there might be. And this is not the dichotomic differences in only, but it is maybe something more nuanced. I think you were also talking about nuances in all of your talks. And in order to then maybe also create something in the first place which you call the self-organized infrastructure, which is your way of also using digital means, because there are distances between geographies, and they could be overcome by something, you know, Paola, that we have been thinking of such a repository where whenever you cannot just hop onto an airplane, and we shouldn't, that there might be some tools that help us still being in touch, having this idea or platform of mutual learning and solidarity, I think called it, in order to sustain this invitation to get together in the idea of your struggle is my struggle. And I think it's much more graspable to my understanding than just climate change. We have heard of it so much, you know, than neoliberalism, even though all of this is behind, you know, of ideas like cleaning, which is also often cleaning of others, or to design, which is not necessarily only design as this big word, and the heroes that do it, you know, of course we have a lot of those, and they're in books. But it might also be design, not necessarily for people, but with people, for out there, everything that is surrounding us, but with everything that is surrounding us. So I think that is a little bit where we could maybe end when we are reading those authors, when we are taking them serious, or taking also the forces serious, or this elan that comes out of often women's voices. And we had some examples of your projects, very much on the ground, but also in abstract fields like epistemology and philosophy and many other disciplines. So I'm not sure if you would like to add something, but otherwise, as there's a storm unfolding outside, and it's not exactly the moment the ducto is going out, but we have looked at the weather forecast, and this seems to be going over this place for a little bit, and then it's clear again, clear skies. Yeah. So why wouldn't you come and share a beer with us, or a drink? And that's maybe the way of bridging over the storm that's outside and
we are safe
taking a bit to inside. Yeah? So thank you very much again for being here together.